Hey everybody, my name is Ramon Perez. I'm from Raid Press. We're a local studio and publisher here in Toronto. We've been around for almost 25 years as a studio, which is crazy, makes me feel old. And as a publisher, about 7 years. And to my right, we have Ivan Kochmarek, he doesn't like to be called a historian of Canadian comics, but we're going to call you that right now. And Darcy, Shea, who is an editor, managing editor at Raid Press. And we're here to talk about the Canadian comics of World War II, a lost era of comics that existed for a brief time. And Ivan is going to take you on a bit of a journey, telling you a little bit about the characters, why they happened, why they ended, where they went, about the creators a little bit maybe, and a book we're producing which collects two-book set which collects the covers, all the covers that ever existed during this run, which is just shy of 800 covers, as well as the other book will focus on the creators who created these characters. So it'll be a nice 2-volume set, probably in total about 600 pages. We're still putting it together. But it's a wonderful set, one of the covers, one of the creators, and shall we move along?
Wonderful.
Yeah, and on your seats you'll see little postcards of some of the covers, and on there's a QR code to the project we're talking about. If you're interested, you can explore a little bit more.
And there's more takeaways up here and some pamphlets, not the comics.
Not the comics, but with little pamphlets with some more information that we'll touch upon during the presentation.
So I brought 5 of these original Canadian comics from the 40s, from the time of the war. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. And we'll take this wherever you guys want to take it. I'll provide some skeleton background information, and please ask questions at any time. You know, the question, sort of the comment I get the most when I give a talk like this, and with these guys, people come up to me at the end of the talk and say, I didn't even know we had our own Canadian comics at all back in the Golden Age. And that's why I call myself more a champion of these Golden Age Canadian comics than a historical researcher or something. I want to get these back into our cultural consciousness and get us thinking about these things again, because these things are full of Canadian pride and nationalistic pride back 80 years ago.
That's kind of happening again.
Happening again. Maybe that's a place to start. You know how today we're sort of got a tension between Canada and the US because of tariffs and because of this 51st state stuff? Back then there was another tension. Canada got into the war in 1939, in September, right at the start of September. And after a year and a bit, like around the fall of 1940, the dollar was suffering. The economy was down. So the Canadian government had to figure out a way to boost it back up. One of the ways they figured out was to stop things coming in from the States so our money wouldn't go south that they deemed unnecessary to the war effort. So it was like candy bars, some toiletries, and comic books, pulps and comic books too. They closed the door on comic books. So when 1941 came around, there were no American comic books on the shelves. But a bunch of entrepreneurial Canadian publishers jumped in. They were ready for this because they knew it was coming. So they were revving up, and by February 1941, Canadian books started to appear on the stands. The first one was Better Comics #1, with our first superhero, who was called the Iron Man. Not Tony Stark Iron Man. But this guy was more like a Submariner clone.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the wings on his feet, but he dressed the same and did the same things. So that was right at the start. And for 6 years, 1941 to 46, we had our own comics until the Second World War ended in 45, the summer of 45, and the ban was lifted by the Canadian government. The American books started to pour back in, and this just killed our Canadian comics. We couldn't compete with those glossy, garish, Superman, Batman, Captain America, everything like that. And our comics fell by the wayside. By the start of 1947, they were gone. But these are the comics I want to talk about. There are about 788, almost 800 of them. Individual issues. And in the book about covers, we've gathered together, I think, over 99% of them.
Yeah.
I'm short about 6 that I can't find. I've done the archives at different places, I've done collectors, and there's about 6 I can't find. But that's a good score.
Yeah.
And we're proud to put out this book. It'll have, 4 covers on a page, and you'll see some of the information in this pamphlet about the type of thing that's coming out. And some of the more important and interesting covers will be a bit bigger. And it'll be a companion piece to the first volume, which was that, I don't know if you guys know it, The Heroes of the Homefront, which is about the creators, the guys and the kids. There were some kids that created 15, 16, 17 these comics back then because the older men were being drafted. And so the first book is about the creators with some original art from the archives up in Ottawa. And the second book is about all the covers, and they go together. You can get them.
Yeah,
I can do some promo here.
Yeah.
There's a slipcase edition that Ramon wants to put out.
So with the first book, I think you originally printed 500, the one
Yeah.
you did yourself. And
Yeah.
that's sold out, basically, The Heroes of the Homefront. So we're reissuing it, re-editing it a little bit, tightening it up, and doing 2 beautiful 9x12, so they're oversized books. Reissue the first edition, but also have the new edition with all the covers.
So look for that sometime in the new year.
Yeah.
Early.
The Kickstarter campaign will be in the fall, but the books will be on the shelves publicly in the new year.
Okay, let's get on with the presentation. This guy you know. Came around in '75, Captain Canuck. But 30 years before that, 35 years before that, there was the first Captain Canuck. And that was Johnny Canuck. He was a captain in the Special Forces. This guy I like, he's okay, but he's no Johnny Canuck. And there's Johnny. Johnny was created by Leo Bachel. He didn't have any superpowers, but he was just sort of a member of the Special Forces in the Air Force. And he dropped down into different areas where the Axis was operating and fight them. And he mainly used his fists. One thing peculiar about him, his shirt always used to come off and rip apart.
I have that problem.
I never figured. And in this sequence, you see him worming his way into one of his Hitler's hideouts, castles, and finding Hitler, who reaches for a gun, and Johnny Canuck jumps across the table and smashes him in the face. And that important panel there in the middle is one of the most shown panels in old Canadian comics. And that's, I can't even read what he says from here.
The Germans had better start making stronger rope if they want to hold Canadians captive.
I can see that.
It's a bit of a glare from this angle, you can't really see it, but they can see it well.
Now you notice that Canadian comics inside are two-tone. They don't have the color of the American comics. And they were called the Canadian Whites because of that, by collectors in the 60s, once they started finding them. I never liked that name, because if you're standing in the supermarket line going ahead and say, I love Canadian Whites, it doesn't go. And besides, they weren't all black and white. There was about 85% black and white, and a whole bunch of them were in color. And, but they were black and white because we didn't have the proper color presses or access to them. Some in the later years, in 46, 45, 46, started to be produced in full color, but not through the whole period. So you'll see the insides, and if you look at these, at the end you can come up and look at them if you want a couple of them. I don't mind you looking through these. You'll see that the interiors are black and white. Johnny Canuck never made a cover. He was not that important of a hero, even though we've latched onto him now. He was always in the back of a comic book, and he never had a cover appearance. But people have sort of taken after him because of the name and because of the stance.
And he punched Hitler, too.
And he punched Hitler. This is the book that came out a few years ago. Raid has it.
Yeah.
And you can get it at the table, I think, still.
It's Raid Press AP26, right by the Pizza.
It's a collection of all the stories in one place. Really well done by Rachel Ritchie.
Yeah.
Pick one up if you can. And this is the main character that I think of when I think of the old Canadian comic books. Nelvana of the Northern Lights. Now she was an Inuit demigoddess. A demigoddess is somebody produced from a human and a god. Her mother was an Inuit lady, and her father was Koliak, a mythical king of the Northern Lights. So she was there to protect the Inuit people. She had all the powers that Koliak could give her, anything to do with the Northern Lights, writing the Northern Lights, sending beams out, becoming invisible, changing shape, all of this stuff. And she came onto the scene 3 or 4 months before Wonder Woman in the States. So she's first. And after a lot of adventures up in the north for the first few issues, she came down to southern Ontario and fought spies and strange science fiction creatures down south here. And she's become an icon, a totem of this. You see that funny cover on the right with the Great Dane that she's riding? That's her brother. I've forgotten what his name is now, but he's cursed, and he can't show his normal human form. He looks a lot like Johnny Canuck, except he's blonde. He can't show his form to humans. So whenever Nelvana appears in humans, he has to be a Great Dane. But as soon as he gets away from humans, he changes back to his original shape. Adrian Dingle was the creator of this character, created it from a story brought by a group of 7 artists, Franz Johnston from up north, which was this Nelvana legend up there. He brought it back, and Dingle took it on and produced this. Very creative.
And our biggest animation company is named after.
That's right. These guys, in 1970, they found a stash of these comics at a warehouse and sold them to the archives in Ottawa, and from that money seeded the Nelvana Animation Company, which they named after Nelvana. And that company became, in the 80s and 90s, the largest independent animation company in the world.
Everything from droids to Care Bears.
Droids, it's the first, they created the cartoon with the first appearance of Boba Fett.
Yep.
And actually,
Wars holiday special.
I did a panel on that last year. We had the creators here, and we did, and we got a nice turnout. We talked about, we showed that cartoon, and it was a good result. Nelvana and Johnny Canuck, the two big mainstays. There's some modern takes on Nelvana. If we brought her back, do you think she'd do well?
I'd have to modernize her a bit, I think.
With an Inuit writer.
Yeah.
Give her-
exactly. Bring some Inuit culture into the fold.
Give her a pocket for her cell phone. And this is a painting that Adrian Dingle did. A lot of these guys who did comic books were also fine artists. They studied at the Ontario College of Art, and there were no jobs around, so they did comic books where they were paid $5 or $6 a page. And Adrian Dingle produced an oil painting in 1951 of Nelvana, which stood over a bar. It was a porthole shape because it was on a yacht in Toronto Harbor, and it stood over a bar.
That's awesome.
I know where it is now, but that person doesn't want to sell it. Here, this guy's probably the biggest hero, Freelance. He's another sort of guy with no powers, just like Captain America or Batman, and his uniform is always a red t-shirt and jodhpurs and boots. That's the most common uniform there is during the Golden Age in Canada. They sort of look like Mounties from the bottom up, and then have a top that's different. He was raised by a tribe that existed in a crater in the Arctic, in a volcano in the Arctic. And he grew up there, and then when he came of age, he got his education outside, and he went across the theater in North Africa, fighting the Axis in Germany, through Europe and in the Pacific. He's called Freelance because they got the name from knights of King Arthur's Round Table that would freelance. They would just fight for whoever paid them, whoever hired them. And he's sort of like the Lone Ranger. You know, he goes and fights evil wherever he is, and he has a little card, looks something like that, that's in the middle, that little design on it, a guy riding a lance, and he hands that out whenever he goes anywhere. This guy was the biggest character, the most read in the golden age of Canadian comics. And there's some rumor, when I did a couple of interviews, to do my books, I had to find the artists who are still alive or the children of them. When I talked to them, one family said that some of their people fought on D-Day, June 6, 1945. 44, that's right. D-Day 44, thanks for correcting me. Because the war ended in 45. And they said that they saw a freelance comic buried in the sand on the beach. Our soldiers were reading them. The kids would send them to their big brothers or fathers that were fighting in the forces. They would be in Air Force bases and in England. You'd find them everywhere. So there's freelance. And there he is in Canada. He finally makes it to Canada at the end of his stories, and he's on a volcano somewhere in the Northwest Territories.
These were like a lot of young artists, too.
They were. This guy, the guy that did freelance was a bit older, but a lot of them were like 15, 16. Like I said, because the older guys, a lot of them were drafted and didn't appear.
That's really high quality art.
And that's something that's a put down of those comics when they first came out. That people always said that, oh, this art isn't very good. It's not like the American comics. It's not up to the quality of that. But if you look through these issues, actually, hold them in your hands and read them, you see the art is really good. This is one guy called Thunderfist.
He's my favorite.
By Murray Carn, who was about 20, 21 when he did these. Another educated OCA, a fine artist. To me, he's a little bit too stiff. And he channels Alex Raymond, if you know Alex Raymond. So a lot of his stuff looks like Alex Raymond, but a lot of people like him. And Thunderfist is a gadget guy. This guy is more like Iron Man, with gadgets all over the place. He has a helmet that prevents him from getting shot. He makes him invulnerable. A glove that he wears and he just punches through anything he wants to. That's why he's called Thunderfist. And boots that allow him to run along electrical lines and wires as fast as almost the speed of light. And a little TV screen that he invented for his wrist that he can see anything in the world that he wants to.
The first Apple Watch.
Yeah. And there he is. I like this page because it shows him landing at the Scarborough Bluffs. And see, that's the thing you get in Canadian comics. You get Canadian locations a lot, which you don't see in the American comics. Good old Thunderfist. This is one of my favorites, Speed Savage. The funny thing about Speed Savage is that's not Speed Savage in the costume, the red and orange costume there. That guy's called the White Mask. Speed Savage is his Clark Kent identity. And for some reason they called the series Speed Savage. Speed Savage is a sportsman that travels to events, golf, skiing, motorboat racing, car racing all over Canada. He's a super athlete. But when he fights crime, he puts on a costume. His first costume looked more like a fedora and a cape and a mask. That's his early costume. But then they got him into spandex a couple of issues later. And that's the way he stayed. Speed Savage and the White Mask. There he is fighting the mole. It's funny, you don't usually get a mole before Fantastic Four's mole. You don't get them fighting like arch nemesis as much. You get them fighting spies in the war and Nazis and the Japanese. So it's unusual to find a sort of a costume foe.
Because the villains were real at the time, basically.
Yeah, sort of like today too. There's another guy, the Penguin, not the Batman Penguin. I think he came a little bit after the Batman Penguin, but he has the stupidest costume.
I love it.
He's one of O.J. Anderson's favorite guys. O.J. wants to put a series out of this and create a new 30-page story about him. But how can you have a beak that sticks out to here and fight crime? Tuxedo and a beak. He doesn't pierce anybody with a beak, he just wears it. And he has a secret identity that's never revealed. Yeah. Another guy created by Adrian Dingle, a guy who did Nelvana. There he is in operation. And he became, after the war, Dingle felt he had to change him. He called him the Blue Raven and changed his costume a little bit to bring him up to date. Okay, this guy is out the West Coast. We had 3 places that produce comics in Canada: Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And this is a Vancouver character. He's called Brock Windsor. And he's a doctor, a physician, a medical doctor that goes on a canoe trip in Lake of the Woods, passes through some mysterious mists, comes out on the other side, and he's in a different land. The mists put him to sleep, and he wakes up, and he's grown to about 12 feet tall in this new land. And he meets these sort of native people who look like First Nations people, but they're technologically advanced. This is hard to explain. You have to read the thing. And he finds out he's dying from this special new mist that he's gone through that makes him grow and that if he doesn't get the antidote from the magic blue springs, he'll die. So the quest is to get the antidote, and he gets it in the end, and comes back to Canada after the war. But this is another collection of Brock Windsor, if you can find it. I think, do you have any?
No, we don't. We've been trying to get a hold of it, but that was done by
Hope
Larson.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is a second female figure called the Wing. It doesn't have any really superpowers except she can fly, and she works as a comic book creator in her daily identity. Her name is Trixie something, I can't remember the end of it. But she has her adventures. So there wasn't just one Nelvana female superhero. There were a couple of others. I like the Wing a lot. This is the Montreal hero, Canada Jack. Where's my Montreal comic book? Canadian Heroes, one of these. Yeah. These were created in Montreal, and they were more like this thing. They were supposed to be education, like classic comics or real world comics. It talked about the history of Canada, famous people, sports figures, what was going on in the war heroes. And by the end of the first year, they figured they needed a hero. So they created this guy, Canada Jack, who goes out in a gymnastics outfit, and again has no superpowers, just guile and agility and super athletic ability. And fights crime, and like Batman and Superman, lead the way to teach kids how to act during this wartime period. Doc Stern, a character developed late in WoW comics that just has adventures like a soldier of fortune, goes around having adventures with criminals and beasts and everything. But what's important about him, he becomes in the last issue of Triumph Comics, he becomes this guy,
Monster Hunter.
Mr. Monster, and has an adventure and updated by Michael Gilbert in the 80s, and a whole new series of adventures. And this is a raid book that Raid's put out.
Yeah, he's one of those guys they made him, they put him into color.
Yeah, that's right.
To kind of compete with the American comics at the time,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, he didn't survive the changeover.
Well, nobody did, really.
No, nobody did.
They put out a couple of color comics at the end, trying to sort of compete with the American comics, but it was futile. And they just put out a couple of issues and then died.
Yeah, he just got interesting.
Yeah. And there we talked about the books already.
Yeah.
So that QR code will take you to some.
Same with the ones on your chairs there, same place.
So those are the statements I want to make to give you the background on this, and I'd love to take questions on anything you have about that period, about the comics, about the heroes, anything. Yes, please.
So in compiling these books, you're looking at finding 800 covers. Can you walk us through the process of tracking down the history of these comics? You mentioned the archives. Is this going to the National Archives in Ottawa? And if you do go there, can you pull them out and read them?
Yeah, you can. The archives has 2,200 original art pages from those comics. That was part of the deal they got from the Nelvana guys. And you have to go through some hoops. You have to apply and get checked at the front. You have to apply a few weeks before you go. But they let you up there and you give you little white cotton gloves, which are hard to turn comic book pages with. And I went up there and I took pictures of all the artwork I wanted, as much as I could, and then put them in the book. But you can go up there, there's no trouble. It's on Wellington Street, just a couple blocks over from the Parliament buildings, on the same street there. And then the other two archives in Canada, in Ontario that I know of, Western University, the Weldon Library had a huge collection of about 200 books from this period donated to them. And you can access them as well. But it's always under supervision. And you're tempted so much to put them in your briefcase, but stay away from that. Because these have gone up in value like crazy. And I feel bad about it because I think it's mainly because I started writing about them and letting people know about them. And I became an Overstreet advisor on them, and now it costs you $500 to get one of these at least.
Yeah, so isn't there Ryerson also has a collection?
Ryerson, now called Metro.
Oh, yes,
I praise their
yeah.
collection.
Yeah.
They have about 122 of the Bell comics. That's the Toronto comics, the ones with Nelvana and the Wing that you can look at there. So they have a collection. Those three places, the archives up in Ottawa, Western University, and Metro University. if you want to get them. Yes, please.
When did you start getting involved in the history of this? When did this become an interest?
Well, as you can see, I'm an oldster. I retired in 2012. I was an inner city school teacher for about 25 years. I taught ESL kids whenever they came over. There was a trauma in Somalia or in the Balkans, they'd have a war. We'd get a few hundred of them.
Toronto, like inner city?
No, in Hamilton inner city. And those kids taught me far more than I ever taught them, I'll tell you that, because they came from places you can't imagine. But when I retired, I needed to find a passion of some sort, because I'm not somebody I don't play golf, and I don't sit around on my porch in a rocking chair. So I needed something to keep me going. And I was a comic book collector all my life from way back in the 60s. And I said, I know there's these old Canadian comics, there's been 2 or 3 things written about them, but nobody's really looked at them before. So I started doing a sort of a blog online and researching as much as I could to produce that book in 2018, produce a price guide for them, a first initial price guide for them the same year. And that's the way it happened, and I haven't stopped. I mean, I've started to become some sort of authority, which I never intended to, but that's the byproduct of all that stuff. And I love speaking about them. That's why I call myself a champion of these old comics. I want you to know about them, get the reprints, read them. If you find one, you're lucky in the field somewhere. They're so rare because they didn't have the same print runs that they had in the States. The maximum print runs here are 50,000. In the States, there were 1 million. And there was no culture afterwards to save those comics. Like in the States, you had collectors that would hold on to them. Here, no. And besides that, there was a paper shortage during the war, so a lot of them got recycled. And they got sent to soldiers, to different people all over the world, and different places like that. Question, please.
I have a bunch, but so 800 issues, essentially 800 stories.
800. Some of them were had reprints of American stuff in them towards the end.
So out of all of that original golden age of Canadian comics, have there been any that really like cemented Canadian culture, like something that a character in a way that when Captain America came out, the flag in itself is a symbol, which Captain Canuck I think carries that whole thing. You guys at Raid have, Calvin did the redesign for it. I'm just curious, like there's so many of these characters now. This is my first time hearing about it too. What captures Canadiana that could be brought in today?
There's been a couple of attempts. I think Ty Templeton.
They tried to bring them up to date.
A couple of times. Chapter House has done a couple of reissues of some of the characters. Because a lot of them are public domain, so you can really kind of grab and do what you want with them, I think, for the most part.
I do think that's part of what makes it, not to nerd out on it a bit, but like part of what makes it so cool is this sort of like, the amount of like historical contingencies that had to take place for this to happen. Like you've got young men writing comics for young men, or young women as well. There was large scale legislative issues of world war, all this, and so for this time, like it's almost like the fact that they aren't still around is what makes them sort of wonderfully special. Like because you will never see something like this again. You will never have a moment where people were going to a draft, and so who's going to draw the comics? Well, the people that are too young to go fight.
That might happen if Trump sends his troops up
Or
here.
but I'm just saying there's something really wonderfully beautiful about how this kind of moment can't happen again.
Yeah.
So maybe your question is like, we could try to bring it into the modern age, but maybe you can't.
I think there are certain characters too that kind of grab your like imagination. Like Mr. Monster is one of my favorites, and Michael T. Gilbert, like as Ivan mentioned, resurrected that character. He found the original in a comic book bin, fell in love with it. According to his story, I think he said he tried to find if it was owned by anybody, didn't, and it became a very popular 80s character, like much more muscle bound and crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think there are certain gems here, like Ho Che Anderson loves the Penguin. So it's really just about, I think, an artist or a creator latching onto these characters and really bringing them forward,
But I want to respond to this. Your question is a good question, but you got to remember, it was different to be Canadian back then, 80 years ago. I mean, we didn't really start becoming Canadian, in my estimation, until we had the flag in 65, the Maple Leaf flag. Back there in these comics, you don't see anything Maple Leaf. You don't even see a red ensign. It's all Union Jack, Union Jack, Union Jack. That was our flag. So we got the flag in 65. We had Expo 67, which was a big showcase to the world of what we're about in 67. And we had also the Hockey Summit Series between Canada and Russia in 72, which really brought us together as a country. And we started to have artists on the radio like Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, which you'd never had before. You could hear it on American radio. So we started to puff our chests up then. Back then there wasn't. There isn't a single superhero as a maple leaf. There's on here. But we have a national identity. In those two great wars, the First World War and Second World War, our pride swelled up. Not in the way it does now, but in that way. So that these things are full of that. So that was a good question. And you had a question as well, sorry, that you wanted to get.
Well, I was just going to ask Raymond, when did Ray get involved in this?
We started talking to Ivan maybe 2 years ago, I think it was, or something like that. I actually was researching because I wanted to do an anthology series based on these characters. Speaking of resurrecting the characters, I first came across the characters on stamps that Canada Post issued back the 90s, I think.
95, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, who are these characters? So I started to dive in, and as we started to encroach on publishing through the studio, I was like, oh, it'd be great to do an anthology of these characters, talk to different artists about maybe Canadian artists tackling these unique, because there's some really strange ones we haven't even touched upon here, like Major Jojo and Domo, I think it is one where it's like a midget who rides a big guy, and it's just.
Let me tell you about him quickly because he's one of my favorites.
He's amazing.
It's pretty cool. I like that.
Major Domo and Jojo. Major Domo was a war hero in the Battle of Arnhem who lost both his arms at the shoulder. And Jojo, his partner, is a circus dwarf. He was a big muscular guy who worked in European circuses. So when he wants to fight crime, Jojo jumps on his back and becomes his arms because they put a trench coat over him. And Jojo puts his arms through the trench coat, a big fedora, and they go out and they fight crime.
Amazing.
And it was written by created by Avram Yanovsky, who was a communist all his life, actually. Started off in Winnipeg in the Winnipeg riots in 20 and 21, and came here and became an artist and a fine artist. There's a wonderful Bethune mural that's still around somewhere. And he was the father of this guy called Zal Yanovsky, who was the lead guitarist of The Love and Spoonful, if any of you remember 60s music. And he started restaurants out in Kingston, where he was from. So that's Major Domo.
Yeah, and there's like a plethora of these characters. Polka Dot Pirate, there's so many you could go on about. And
I love Active Jim.
Active Jim, yeah, he's really active.
He's just a very active lad.
Now please, Jamie. Active Jim.
Active Jim, yeah.
He plays all kinds of sports. He does stuff.
I was wondering, with the book of coverage, will you also be bringing in information?
We'll have information on the date and things like that, some supplementary information for sure.
Yeah.
And there was some, please.
After these comics died, did some of the artists manage to stay on in comics?
A lot of them became commercial artists. Some of them went to the States and did comics in the States. Mel Crawford was one. And some of them became fine artists.
Yeah, we have like in our Mr. Monster collection, we actually have some interviews done with Fred Kelly, who invented the original Mr. Monster, and he went into architecture, I believe, at one point.
Yeah,
real estate sale. He tried. We have a bunch of reprints of. He tried to get work as a newspaper strip artist with some beautiful, beautiful comic strips. Like his Mr. Monster work is actually his earlier, younger work, very rudimentary. So we have some scans of like a couple of comics he was proposing to the newspapers, but he never got a foothold. So he went to real estate, and he kind of never realized the fandom that kind of followed his work after that, till Michael T. Gilbert, I guess, found him, or someone found him and reconnected him with Michael T. Gilbert, who had made something of his character over the years. So a lot of these guys just kind of moved on and went on and got real jobs, quote unquote, and went forward.
Yeah, a couple of them taught at OCAD because they became fine artists and they became teachers of artists. One of them, Ross Mendez, was Seth's teacher at OCAD, and if I asked Seth to do a page, he said, if I ever do a page on these guys, I'll do my teacher, Ross Mendes, who taught me. There's just, oh, sorry.
Oh, there's a guy behind you there?
Somebody, yeah, please.
Yeah, my question is just regarding sort of print production during that time, where the U.S. Were kind of closed off the receiving of American comic books, and then the Canadian comic books started to develop and be produced. Because those channels were cut off, how did that impact or develop printing or the publication of these comics in Canada? Did anything change or?
Well,
Like, did the printing presses improve for our system?
Yeah, just how.
How did it affect our printing economy? I think it was always there. We did our
it was there. We had
newspapers.
newspapers. In fact, the color comics that came out in 1946 used the Globe and Mail printing press. They were allowed to produce, because they produced Sunday color comics. They were allowed to produce them there. But there were sign painters, sign stores that became comic book publishers.
It was like a pivot. It was
Yeah.
actually quite like there was a
That's
vacuum,
good.
and they saw a lack in the market,
Yeah.
and they jumped on it.
Yeah.
People want to read comics.
Yeah.
That's
Question at
what
the back.
Yeah, okay, these sheets right here, this character here, Bullet Man, is that a Canadian comic or is that just related to the,
That's an American comic.
okay, never mind then.
No, it's not. It's a Canadian comic. That's an American character.
Oh, so what, what's the thing about it? 'Cause I just saw something about him and I'm just interested if that's the case.
This is a weird, because the one thing you find out about these comics and the time they were published, everything was weird. Sorry, Anglo-American, a Toronto publisher, they had offices on John Street, had a deal with Fawcett, who put out American heroes like Spy Smasher, Captain Marvel, Bullet Man. But the act that the government made said you couldn't reprint those comics. Fawcett wanted to get those comic characters into Canada. What the government allowed was them to send the scripts up, but they had to be redrawn by Canadian artists. So all those comic books like that have them on the cover, the stories are in black and white, and each story has been redrawn. You can find the story in the American comic and compare them. Sometimes our artwork, I think, is better than the ones that appeared in the
There's
American
some
comic.
great Captain Marvel stories that are I think far better
That's
up
what I
here.
wanted to know, because I just heard about this character recently and.
Okay. And
Please.
you want to know about it in here so that more front covers.
Please, your question.
Just kind of curiosity, you guys have a lot of the comics like in archives and stuff, and like we have access to them, but are there any of them that like are missing, like they're just lost to history?
No, I think there's at least one copy of each one. Somehow, magically, mysterious has been saved. So there's no unfound issue that we can't find, which we're thankful for.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
Except for like the 3 or 4 we don't have a cover for.
Well, we can't. I know they're around.
They're around somewhere.
But who's got them?
That's pretty impressive, though, that we've managed to find as many as we have.
Any other questions?
Yep.
I'll ask two if it's okay. One kind of tailing off yours, mentioning that some of these characters and the people who created them went on possibly to the States. I just noticed a lot of similarities with like Nelvana and Snowbird and Alpha Flight.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's John Byrne based Bullet's people like Sasquatch, and there's that character in Puck,
Yeah.
which is JoJo that made it almost adaptation.
No trench
They
coat.
lived on.
Yeah, because John Byrne being Canadian probably, at one point came across some of these guys.
And just curious if there are any plans, like you've shown a couple of collective editions of some of them.
Yeah.
But will there be plans, like a compendium of all?
Our hope is if this 2-book set does well, we'd like to actually go through and collect every major character. Because a lot of these guys were like, some of these comics were they'd have a feature story and a backstory and stuff like that. So we collect like the major ones. Like we already have a Johnny Canuck collection. We have a Mr. Monster collection. I'd love to do a Thunder Fist collection. I know a Vanna collection exists already as well. So we would probably try to consolidate these into a nice clean set of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So really just rests on if this does well, we'd like to actually
What
start
I'm
collecting
thankful
them
for
all.
Ramon for and Raid Studio is they decided to have sort of a heritage arm,
Yeah.
which they want to produce.
Yeah, we
these
really
books
like,
back.
there's so much great Canadian on us, so like these books, and One thing we touched about also is Nelvana. We're also working on an art book for Rock and Roll, which is a famous, So we've been scanning old cells, sketch art, talking to animators from back in the 70s.
I'm sorry, I got the signal and we got to wrap
go
up.
for it, yeah.
So we got to wrap up. Come up and get another pamphlet here on the book that's coming out with covers. And we'll be around for questions outside if you want some more questions. Sorry, didn't get to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for everybody showing up, man.
What kind of circulation did you get in those old days?
Well, that was a big thing with Canada. It was such a big country to distribute across from Vancouver to Newfoundland. It was about 50,000 they'd print.
No, how much did it cost?
It says 10 cents here
10
on the cover.
cents, some were 15 cents. Thank
Thanks,
you.
man. Thank you for all the great questions.